To eloquently quote my wife when I present my fridge-worthy masterpiece. It's not enough. It's not enough to give them big old beautiful eyes and a heartwarming smile. They need more. The role demands a concrete purpose. It's not a vacancy that you just have to fill. Unfortunately, it's become a tradition to have that animal side character included whether it's forced and contrived or not. So, when that role is filled out of sheer brute force and they don't really have a real purpose for that supporting role, the writers often like to fall back on the comfortable, safe option for that character, being the comic relief. Fingers crossed, maybe one day they'll realize that being funny doesn't magically justify them breaking down the petting zoo doors.
I'm gonna pet you. Oh, you better believe I'm gonna pet you.
But I have a feeling that these naive dreams are destined to bow down to tradition. Contrary to what my ranting might sound like, I have no problem with these characters being inherently funny. The comic relief undoubtedly has its place, but these roles can fill bigger boots than just cracking a joke every now and then. But since we are on the topic of boots, it's only fitting that we cement what makes an excellent supporting role in this context of animal sidekicks. I can think of no better jumping off point than Puss in Boots and Donkey, in my opinion at least, has held the title for best animal sidekick, well, since always. Both Puss in Boots and Donkey are excellent characters, and out of respect for first come first serve, I want to focus on Donkey. Full disclosure, I am biased towards the Shrek franchise, and rightly so, because it has some of the greatest animated movies ever conceived and birthed by humankind. Donkey isn't just excellent comic relief, he has an actual purpose. He has a real life outside the story we are seeing at the moment, and that's why he's a fantastic character. Donkey carries substance. He isn't just a pet that was dragged along the journey. He was the only one that knew where Farquaad's castle was, and as we continue on this journey, we see him coming more and more into his role as a supporting character. Just because these characters are the supporting role doesn't mean they deserve less time and attention from the writers. If you just give them the bare necessity, the role will be more akin to a corpse on strings than a fleshed out relatable character worthy of our time. He was the first one to see Shrek for who he really is. He didn't see the monster everyone else saw. He didn't latch on to this idea that Shrek is the monster from the swamp to avoid and run away from. Donkey was the first one that Shrek and Fiona started to open up to rather than each other. He was the one to go to Shrek's swamp to tell him to stop wallowing in self-pity and hiding from the world. He challenged the assumptions that Shrek had as a result of years of being treated like an outcast. But he wasn't just there to be all smiles. He pushed back when it was needed and said what he believed to be the right thing to say. But he also forgave quickly, and we get a glimpse of his own life while he proves again why he is worthy of the podium. He was a great friend, but he also had his own life behind the scenes. He had kids and a family. We see him hiding at Shrek's house when there's some trouble at home, adding to the dimension of this character. Sadly, Donkey took more of a backseat in the sequels, especially when the role had to be shared with another character. Introduction of Puss in Boots was phenomenal. We first see him not as a pet, but as a bounty hunter with a reputation and flaws and a backstory. Again, he has his own life, and we see his story when he takes center stage, and his backstory is excellently explored in his own movies, where we are introduced to Perito, where he served as a vital role as the emotional support animal. That is how life really is. We are all the supporting characters, the protagonist and antagonist at some point in our lives. That is why when a protagonist is saddled with a purely comic relief or cutesy animal, it ruffles my feathers. Its potential wasted away, and they are likely included purely out of stubborn tradition. It is a role with potential for real value, but I would rather you fill the role with a buffoon that has something to say for 5 minutes than the cutest pet with the biggest glittering eyes that adds nothing but a cheap chuckle now and then. Because when you are facing real life demon, a pair of big beautiful eyes will mean nothing. I realize that in Shrek those big eyes are used as a weapon, but that's just because the writers were creatively mocking the general idea of animal sidekicks. It is unfortunately more common to have the cutesy, funny support character than to have one with impactful choices, personality, and significance. And to make it even worse, the frequency with which they usually have more than one is shocking. often they're given the smallest bit of busy work to do with the aim of justifying their existence. But I want to be clear on this point. There's a difference between having a character that is organically included in the plot because there's a purpose and including a character because they're cute and then trying to give them tasks to make them seem relevant. Arguably, one of the best examples of this is Mulan. There are characters on both sides of the spectrum. We have Mushu and Cricket. We are first introduced to Cricket through the grandmother that still clings to her superstitions and wants to help Mulan through giving her the lucky cricket. The only two tasks that Cricket has is ruining the matchmaker interaction and helping Mushu craft the message to the army. Both of these tasks can very easily be replaced by Mulan being clumsy and Mushu using his tail to write the letter to the army. The Cricket was introduced in a natural way, but there was no need for him to stay throughout the movie. He doesn't add anything of substance. Mushu, on the other side, was awoken when a family prayed to their ancestors to go and help Mulan in the war. So his introduction is valid in the context of the culture being portrayed. And he did it because he was convinced that if he can help Mulan, it'll restore his reputation and honor, and he'll be welcomed back with open arms. He had his own motivations that naturally aligned with Mulan's. He was a character acting on his own agency. He had his own life. If someone accidentally stepped on Cricket, nothing would have been missed. Mushu helped her escape from being caught in the river. He provides motivation and guidance. He was the one to light the fireworks that got rid of the main villain. I'm baffled that in one movie they had a good and a bad sidekick. Why do this at all? Why not just have Mushu? What was the goal of including the Cricket? Was it just to maintain the idea of superstition and tradition? I mean, what does a Cricket add that every other character there doesn't already bring to the table? And before you ask, no, Cricket and the horse are not the same. Having a horse during the war in that time era was the norm. It makes sense that Mulan would have a horse doing horsey things. Similar to Tangled, Maximus makes sense in the context of the story. The gods looking for Flynn losing his tracks and Maximus acting kind of as a proxy for the chief imperial guard. And he is much better at the comic relief than Pascal. The chameleon is truly one of the most inconsequential characters I can think of. Maybe even more than Cricket, they're pretty much neck and neck, except a chameleon being here makes even less sense than a character given out of superstition. I mean, think about it, a cute bird would make much more sense since a bird might actually have landed on the windowsill of Rapunzel's tower, and Rapunzel slowly starts to befriend the bird. But a chameleon, how does that make sense? And I actually enjoyed Tangled overall. It's just these empty characters are kind of like your grandmother's cookie jar, and then you open it up and it's her sewing kit. I'm convinced that if you do not have a purpose for that role and you just omit that character from the movie, no one will be outraged about it. It's fine to not follow tradition. Be creative, have the protagonist go alone if necessary, but please stop this madness. They don't have to be in every movie. I got curious where these animal sidekicks came from and what role did they originally fill. Was it from the original stories that these movies are based on, or what created this movement? Long story short, no. Animal sidekick was a natural progression through the decades more than a fever dream-induced brainwave. These animal sidekicks were not present in the original source stories. However, Disney is notorious for purchasing rights to the source material and then adapting them for wider audiences. And there are two main stories that give the first sparks that would light the fire of this idea. These two are Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Bambi. You can already see how these two led to the rise of the animal sidekick. The story of Snow White is based on the German fairy tale, which was written by the brothers Grimm. Technically, dwarves are not animals, but they are non-human, which added an otherworldly and novel feel to the stories, especially considering that Disney released Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937. At that time, your entertainment options were limited to watching people faint due to lead poisoning or watching the first cel animated movie. Obviously, the movie became wildly successful, and then in 1943, we got Bambi. Having animal characters here made perfect sense. So, when you add piles of money, a bit of white snow, and deer fur, you have the perfect recipe for animal sidekicks. I just wish that the new movie from Disney will do the role justice. Not that I'm hopeful, but as I mentioned before, naive dreams. Hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching.